Don't delude yourself into thinking the Vatican's basement hides bloody pacts with the devil, because the thing that actually made the church tremble enough to seal it away forever turns out to be nothing more than the pronunciation of a few ancient Egyptian words. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But think about it. Thousands of years before the first Bible was penned, the Egyptians held Heka in their hands, the art of using sound to bend reality. The problem with Heka wasn't that it conjured monsters, but that it taught a truth far too liberating. Your soul has power, and you can converse directly with the divine without paying a dime or going through some robed middleman. Ask yourself, if everyone could save themselves, who would the church sell tickets to heaven to? And so, one of the greatest whitewashing campaigns in history began. Guardian gods with animal faces like Anubis or Thoth were suddenly labeled demons, while original rituals of rebirth were lumped in with black magic. Even as late as 1824, when a papyrus scroll carrying the power of words accidentally strayed into a French museum, the Vatican still had to hurriedly dispatch people to make it evaporate without a trace. So, what really happens behind this velvet curtain thick with the smell of incense? Are they protecting humanity from the darkness? Or are they actually panicking to cover up a power that rightfully belongs to us? Welcome to the world of dark history. I am Zorro. Pull your chair closer, because tonight we are reopening the book they spent thousands of years trying to silence. Tonight, we will descend into the darkest halls together. Forget the cheap ghost stories or the legends of demonic possession that Hollywood movies keep chewing over. I want to tell you about a real fear, a primal fear, wrapped in thick layers of lead and buried deep beneath the magnificent basilicas of the Vatican. What do you think the church fears most? Heretics? Demonic forces from hell? No. The thing that makes the most powerful cardinals break out in a cold sweat is something much more ancient: Egyptian magic. Long ago, thousands of years before the first bricks of the church were laid, the temples of Egypt held the ultimate secrets of the soul, the flow of time, and most especially, the unparalleled power of the spoken word. They called it Heka, the force that shapes reality. Don't be mistaken. Please don't equate it with some trivial superstition or the deceptive fortune-telling tricks found in the marketplace. Heka is precision. It is like the source code of the universe, and the ancient Egyptians found the way to type those commands. And ironically, the worst thing for those who dislike it is, it actually works. As Christianity began to stretch its fire hoses across the world, sweeping and dominating, Heka did not evaporate like morning mist. It was absorbed. It was rewritten. It was muzzled, but absolutely not destroyed. It was stuffed inside the most forbidden texts, hidden under the guise of chants that no ordinary believer was allowed to hear. It was locked away in rooms so dark that even high-ranking cardinals did not have the privilege to enter. Have you ever wondered why? This story isn't about fantasy or magical spells like in a fairy tale. Oh no, it is about something much more practical and ruthless: control. Think for a moment with basic logic. If you, yes, you, could talk to the divine yourself, shape your own destiny without needing an intermediary priest, then what would you need the church for? If your soul itself holds sovereign power, you cannot be ruled. Simple as that. Why pay a monthly subscription to a monopoly distributing faith when you can connect directly to the server? And that, my friends, is exactly what they fear. Terror, utmost. So, before you scroll past this video and return to your usual mindless entertainment, ask yourself, what did they erase? And why? After thousands of years, does that fear still persist? Don't forget to like and subscribe to Dark History, because tonight, you and I will pry open the book they spent so much effort trying to burn, to see which words inside are still beating with the pulse of life. That secret should have been locked away forever. It should have rotted at the bottom of the realm of oblivion. But history always has its own bloody sense of humor. On a cool afternoon in 1824, a rotting wooden chest, smelling of the dampness of time, was delivered to a museum in France. It sat there in a pathetic state, misfiled, sloppily mislabeled, and completely forgotten among tens of thousands of other artifacts. Inside the chest, carefully wrapped in decomposing linen, was a papyrus scroll. It was older than anything the museum's archives had ever possessed. At first glance, the librarians just yawned, thinking it was another tedious funeral scroll. But then, when a scholar happened to translate the first line, the air in the room seemed to freeze. Everything changed forever. That papyrus did not praise the gods. It didn't even bother mentioning bland burial rituals. It spoke of light. It spoke of breath. It delved into how an invisible force could bend and shape the physical world using only sound. It wasn't a religious text advising people to do good deeds. It was a grimoire, a manual for manipulating reality. And guess what? Within days, rumors grew wings and flew straight to Rome. Without fanfare, the Vatican acted immediately. They silently dispatched special envoys, ghosts in black robes, to France with a single most urgent order. At all costs, seize that scroll. By the time the French scholars finished brewing their coffee and returned to their desks to study the next part, it had evaporated, vanished without a trace. There was no seizure record, not a single word of explanation, only a chillingly empty drawer. Why would the Church, a mighty empire spanning the globe, bother to turn pale over a spell from some loincloth-wearing guys in ancient Egypt? The answer lies in the lines that the scholar managed to read. The scroll spoke of priests capable of controlling the wind's direction with just a whisper. It detailed how massive temples were structured not for worship, but to amplify the human voice into a physical weapon. It pointed out that the symbols carved on the walls were not decorative writing, but mechanical tools. When pronounced with precise frequencies, they could tear the veil between dimensions. This wasn't mythology to scare children. These were engineering blueprints, construction instructions. This made the Vatican feel as if a cold hand was squeezing their hearts. Because if even a tenth of those lines were true, then the Egyptians weren't just rich guys who liked building pointy tombs. They were holders of an extremely dangerous kind of knowledge, a foundation of truth that didn't need blind faith, but relied on direct experience. You didn't need to cry and beg to believe in some God far above. You just needed to say the right word, in the right order, at the right time. The switch would flip. The Church could not and would never allow that to exist. Not in 1824, and certainly not now. Since that mysterious day, the papyrus has become a ghost haunting the global archival community. Some moles whisper that it lies beneath the Vatican library, obediently sealed in a box cast from solid lead. Others, more romantic, insist that fragments of it are still floating out there, hidden in encrypted texts smuggled out by monks who were too fascinated to burn them. Some even believe that audio segments of Heka were chopped up and stuffed inside early Christian prayers, perfectly disguised in Latin, altered just enough so no one would recognize the true source. But there is one truth that no one can deny. It was never meant to be found. And immediately after the scroll evaporated from France, the Vatican silently updated the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, list of prohibited books. They didn't add a book title. They only added a string of serial numbers, a catalog code that does not exist in any public classification system. So, my friends, the question is no longer whether that papyrus is real. The question is, what truth within it is still making a 2,000-year-old religious empire tremble? Perhaps the Vatican isn't protecting us from heretical lies. Perhaps, just perhaps, they are using every means to cover up a truth that we were never permitted to pronounce. There was once an era when humanity didn't glue their faces to screens or bow down to forbidden scriptures. They looked up at the stars, and in that deep night sky they saw gods with the faces of beasts. Don't let cheap horror movies fool you. Those weren't monsters. They weren't demons crawling up from hell. They were simply primal symbols of power, of absolute balance, and the mysteries that the human mind of that time was trying to grasp. Look at Anubis, the jackal-headed god. He wasn't a soul eater. He was the guardian of the eternal sleep of the deceased. Thoth, the ibis-headed god, oversaw wisdom, mathematics, and writing. And Sekhmet, the lioness-headed warrior goddess, she was the embodiment of a brutal truth. Nature can bring both healing and destruction in the same breath. They weren't evil entities waiting to punish those who accidentally snatched a piece of bread on a fast day. They were forces of the universe. They were stern teachers, protectors, and guides lighting the darkness. But all parties must come to an end. Everything was overturned when a new story began to rampage, spreading across the ancient world like a forest fire met by the wind. And the copyright holders of that new story understood a core principle of power. For new history to be written, you must ensure no one can look back at the past. As Christianity spread across the Roman Empire, sweeping away everything in its path, it slammed into a massive stone wall. Egypt. You see, Egypt was unlike other lands. There, religion wasn't just a belief for Sundays. Religion was mixed into the mortar, woven into every temple wall, every papyrus scroll, every human heartbeat. Their massive temples had stood there defying time for thousands of years before the first word of the gospel was written. Their gods were rooted too deeply in the human psyche to be wiped out by a few decrees. Therefore, the propaganda machine of the early church made a strategic decision, a move that even today's PR experts would tip their hats to. If we cannot eradicate Egypt, we will distort it until it doesn't even recognize itself. And that is exactly the cultural massacre that took place. Anubis, the silent protector, the kind god who weighed the hearts of the dead, was suddenly molded into a hound of hell, a symbol of hideous darkness. His jackal face was suddenly given demonic features. Set, the god representing the chaos necessary for all things to transform and grow, was completely rewritten as the embodiment of absolute evil. Even the great Thoth, the learned brain of the universe, was demoted, smeared into a shady character lurking in old Christian texts. Priceless statues were smashed with sledgehammers. Temples were seized and repurposed. And the names that were once chanted in absolute reverence were now silently struck out and replaced with names that make people shudder. Satan, Lucifer, the devil. Do you think it was just about giving them an ugly name? No, don't be so naive. It was a brilliant psychological strategy. By labeling these great gods as demons, the church handed the masses an easy-to-use weapon: fear. They gave people a reason to run away instead of staying to ask questions, a reason to close their eyes instead of seeking to understand. And that great brainwashing campaign was a resounding success. Within just a few short generations, entire brilliant mythological systems evaporated from the surface of consciousness. Symbols that were once incredibly sacred were turned into warnings of extreme danger. Words containing power that could shake heaven and earth were tossed into dark corners, left for dead because no one dared to translate them. The gods were buried. But ironically, they were never forgotten. Because if you truly open your eyes and look closely, you will still see them. They are right there, laughing at the hypocrisy of time. You can see their shadows lurking in magnificent stained glass windows, twisted in old manuscripts gnawed by termites. Even in the darkest corners of the ceilings of great cathedrals, look at the gargoyles, winged silhouettes, snarling animal masks, unblinking eyes watching. Are they symbols of Christianity? Not exactly. They are remnants, echoes of something much older, something the new power machine tried to swallow but could never fully digest. The real question we need to dissect here is, why, in the first place, did they spend so much effort, blood, and tears to destroy those inanimate silhouettes? Control. It is always about control. Egyptian magic, that ancient Heka, taught humanity a vital lesson. True power does not descend from some cloud, it sprouts from within you. It taught that you, yes, you, have the power to speak directly with the divine realm, without kneeling to ask a priest's permission. It taught that death is not a death sentence, not an end, but just a transitional door to another room of consciousness. Those ideas are like acid thrown straight at the foundations of the new system. They made people too free. And remember this, the freedom of the masses is the most dangerous weapon in the world when you are trying to build a monopoly empire based on submission and blind faith. So, the Egyptian gods were forced to become demons. Their heroic stories were turned into cheap threats to intimidate the flock. Their great wisdom was shackled, tossed into the darkest corners, and slapped with a bright red label, forbidden. But forbidden doesn't mean forever. Today, as the mist of dogma gradually thins, scholars and truth seekers are using shovels to unearth those old stories. They are dusting off and retranslating lost texts, reclaiming justice for names that were once cursed. And the deeper we dig, the more the truth is exposed naked under the sunlight. These gods were never the villains. They weren't demons. They were simply the ones standing in the way. For long, weary centuries, the walls of Egypt screamed a language that no living creature on earth could understand. Look at these temples. They are covered in strange symbols. Dark tombs filled with carvings of beasts, birds, soulless eyes, and blazing suns. For hundreds of years, humanity naively clapped and thought, oh, they're just decorations. Or at most, a primitive code for tattooed savages. But my friends, the truth is always more dangerous than what the eye can see. These symbols weren't just fun illustrations. They were words. They were razor-sharp blades. And the church, with the keen survival instinct of a predator, wanted them silenced forever. Do you know what the most ridiculous part is? Long before anyone in the world could read even a single hieroglyph, the Vatican had already rushed to sign their death warrant. During the dark period of the Middle Ages, robed scholars of the church stood at pulpits, wagging their thin fingers and foaming at the mouth to warn the masses. Egyptian writing is the language of sorcerers. That bowing down to study it was an act of personally opening the door to invite madness and demons into one's head. Some fanatics even whispered to each other that inside those drawings of birds and animals were deadly spells, that if you accidentally read them aloud, the gates of hell that should stay closed would burst open. And so, a silent but bone-chillingly brutal purge began. Any book, any piece of parchment that dared to try and decode these symbols was tossed into the flames. Scholars who happened to be too curious, excommunicated, thrown into the street to starve. Ancient libraries that dared to house Egyptian texts. How coincidental it was that they always caught fire mysteriously in the night. But use your detective brain. The real reason behind that extreme panic wasn't the fear of magic. They weren't afraid of sorcery tricks. What they truly terrified of was memory. Hieroglyphs, my friends, recorded a version of history that slapped the face of what was written in the Bible. It preserved stories of gods descending from the stars, of a great era existing before time even began to be counted, of civilizations that lived, breathed, and built wonders thousands of years before Adam and Eve had time to steal the apple. The church could not and would never allow those fragments of ideas to be planted in the minds of the masses. If hieroglyphs were translated, they would fire cannons at every foundation of their power. Therefore, at all costs, they ensured that no one could try to read them. For hundreds of years, sacred symbols were imprisoned as a dead language, cursed as the ruins of a dead world. Until a stubborn young Frenchman named Jean-François Champollion decided to spit on that prohibition. After years of obsession that bordered on madness, Champollion broke the Vatican's iron cage with the Rosetta Stone. He realized a shocking truth. Hieroglyphs weren't just silent pictures. They were sounds. They were a complete, sophisticated, and brilliant written language. And once Champollion could read them, the past that had been muzzled for thousands of years began to speak. What it screamed shook the whole world. The texts didn't talk about cavemen. They described an incredibly advanced astronomy, calendars accurate to every star groove, and rituals older than the Great Flood in the Bible. They contained protective spells, healing medicine, and even techniques for astral projection. They weren't primitive people. They were brilliant scientists, great mystics, holders of the gears of time. They possessed a massive history that preceded all Western scriptures combined. Suddenly, all of the Vatican's past panic made complete sense. The Church wasn't wrong to be worried. If the masses could read these walls, they would start asking questions, deadly questions. What is our true origin? Who is the real holder of truth? And most ruthlessly, which conductor erased all of this to make way for a single religion? Today, thanks to Champollion's work, hieroglyphs have become history, safely sitting behind layers of bulletproof glass in museums. But don't be quick to believe in the illusion of freedom. Even as we speak, some translations are still locked away in underground vaults. Some tombs are sealed tight without explanation. Sensitive ancient texts still miraculously evaporate from official records. Perhaps the question isn't why the Church once banned hieroglyphs. The question is, right now, what are they still hiding that they don't want you and me to read? Because every time a stone face is decoded, a piece of history returns. And who knows, one day, when the entire code is exposed, the truth will come crashing down like a tsunami, not only sweeping away the lies about Egypt, but about everything. You must understand this. The Egyptians never viewed words the same way we chat or post trivial status updates on social media. For them, words weren't merely sounds coming from the larynx. They were living entities. They believed absolutely that by saying something, you were molding the reality around you. That a precise phrase, uttered from a throat that had been trained at the exact moment of the intersection of the stars, could heal wounds, destroy enemies, cast protective shields, or even pull a soul back from the dead. Words weren't a means of communication. They were Heka. They were magic. And this philosophy, my friends, was a poison pill for the early church. In ancient Egypt, the line between a sentimental prayer and a powerful magic spell did not exist. When a priest stood tall and uttered a name, it wasn't a pathetic plea, it was a command. The name itself contained the entire universe of a person. The more secret the name, the more destructive energy it carried. They carefully carved these names deep into the stone walls of tombs to create an eternal protective circle. If your name was chiseled away, your soul would be erased from the fabric of the universe, no longer existing. But if your name was chanted, echoing in a ritual of thick incense, you could be reborn. In the most brutal and romantic way, memory was immortality. Spoken words kept the soul from dissolving. Now imagine what would happen when a system of thought that powerful slammed into a dogmatic religion, a system that constantly brainwashed the masses into believing salvation only comes from silence, absolute submission, and solely from a censored holy book. Bloody conflict was only a matter of time. The early church deluded itself and propagandized that only the Word of God had real power. Everything else, especially the magical whispers of Egyptian priests, was labeled heresy, a venom that needed to be burned. It gave people too much direct access to the divine realm, too much anarchic freedom. Ask yourself, if a peasant could talk to the Supreme Being himself through Heka without an intermediary, how would the robed guys at the Vatican collect taxes and dispense power? So they acted, banning, censorship, destruction. The beautiful prayers of the Copts, a perfect blend of Christianity and the Egyptian soul, were torn apart. The idea that words carry life energy was smeared as pagan blasphemy. If you just accidentally mispronounced a single tone, you would be thrown onto the pyre. But here is the most classic plot twist in history. In secret, the Vatican kept all those records. Behind thick oak doors locked with many layers, they hungrily studied ancient Egyptian texts. And the ultimate ironic truth is, the church blatantly plagiarized this magic and simply gave it a new label. Latin suddenly became the new holy language, which no one was allowed to translate into common speech. Prayer was no longer natural talking, but had to be chanted according to precise patterns and sound frequencies, exactly like Heka. Murmuring sutras became a ritual. Silence was turned into a power that forced people to submit. While the church loudly warned the public that magic words belonged to the devil, they themselves used the exact same rhythms and sound vibrations behind the altar. Because deep down inside those red-robed chests, they knew the Egyptians were right. Words truly change everything. Even now, you and I feel it. Think back. The way a mocking comment can make the skin on your back crawl. The way a song lyric sticks to your mind like a leech for days. The way just a single name uttered is enough to tear your heart apart or revive a deceased person right in your mind. That isn't hollow superstition. That is quantum connection. That is deep-level ideation. And it has existed since the dawn of time. Perhaps that is the real reason the church feared Heka so much. They didn't fear it because it was fake. They feared it because it was true. The Egyptians understood that when you open your mouth to speak with clear intent, you are reaching into something much larger than yourself. And once you have touched that power, you can never go back to being an obedient sheep again. The truth is, words have always been magic. They have always been so, no matter how many layers of lead they try to cover them with. Let's play a little game. I will read a passage to you. It talks about a soul rising from the underworld, a cold body gradually warming up, and a brilliant light piercing the dark night of death to bring eternal life. Flesh returns to bone, breath flows back into the lungs, and the deceased stands before a divine force to have their heart judged alongside the truth. If they pass, they will be reborn and walk upon eternal fields. Sound familiar? Exactly like a fiery sermon during a Sunday morning mass in Christianity, right? But there is a small, bitter truth that the Vatican always wants to stuff deep under the bed. That passage wasn't written by Christians at all. It is a spell. It was extracted from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, carefully carved onto the walls of tombs, more than 1,000 years before the first gospel was ever whispered by anyone. When scholars first dissected and translated this spell, today we call it spell 168, a nauseating feeling of déjà vu hit them. The similarity between it and the resurrection stories of early Christianity wasn't a coincidence. It was a blatant repetition, one of the greatest plagiarisms in religious history. How could bald priests in the Nile Valley describe in detail the process of resurrecting the dead long before Christianity was even conceived? The church, of course, was speechless. They didn't have a single answer that sounded plausible, so they used their specialty: avoidance and silencing. Translations of the Book of the Dead were strictly restricted. Sensitive pages were accidentally torn or disappeared from published editions. Museums silently locked away fragments mentioning rebirth. But can paper wrap fire? Egypt has its own day of judgment. They have Osiris, the god who died brutally and then rose again gloriously. A familiar script for another famous character we all know, right? Even the ritual of stepping down into the river, being washed clean of sins to enter the light. Yes, that too is made in Egypt. The idea of resurrection wasn't born in a damp cave in Jerusalem. It was carved with hammer and chisel on stone slabs along the banks of the Nile. This made those in power feel exposed. Naturally, it implied that Christianity didn't invent resurrection. They simply inherited it, remixed it, changed the main character's name, and packaged it for a new market audience. The truth is, the idea of death and rebirth is a primal call deep within human DNA, and Egypt just happened to be the first to record it. Speaking of rebirth, we cannot ignore alchemy. Most of the masses out there, brainwashed by cheap movies, think alchemy is just a bunch of skinny, shaggy-bearded old men locking themselves in rooms smelling of sulfur to bake metals, delusional in their hope of turning lead into gold to pay off debts. How pathetic. In ancient Egypt, alchemy was something much grander and deeper than that frivolous yellow metal. Egyptian priests believed everything had 3 layers: material, mental, and spiritual. When they talked about turning lead into gold, they were talking about man himself. Lead was the dark, ignorant, and heavy state of the soul. Gold was enlightenment, a state of brilliance and supreme consciousness. Alchemy was an internal science, and this is when the church's alarm bells rang loudly. Use your brain, my friend. If an individual can practice alchemy themselves, burn away the rubbish in their own soul to reach divine purity, then what do they need a priest for? You don't need to wait in line to be baptized. You don't need to crawl into a cramped wooden box to confess to someone just as sinful as you. You do it yourself. A path to reach the divine without paying a toll? That kind of independent power was an unforgivable witchcraft to an organization that lived off the dependence of the masses. So, the church labeled alchemy pagan, then upgraded it to heresy, and finally banished it to hell. Did they fear alchemists finding gold? Not at all. The church only feared those alchemists finding the light. They feared the awakening. But all of that fear was nothing compared to this final ritual. Imagine you are standing in a tomb heavy with the scent of frankincense. Before you is a mummy. A priest slowly approaches. In his hand is not a dagger, but a tool made of sacred stone. He doesn't cry. He leans down and touches that tool to the dry lips of the deceased. This is the opening of the mouth ritual, Egypt's most sacred ritual, and also the thing that makes the Vatican tremble to their marrow. The Egyptians understood that death is a long journey, but if the soul has no voice, it will be silent forever in the underworld. It cannot chant its name, cannot defend itself, cannot call the gods. So they had to use magic to restore the voice to the dead. The final words echoing in the tomb weren't the moans of, "Lord, have mercy on this soul." No, they were commands as sharp as knives. "Arise! Speak! Remember!" And the Vatican, they panicked completely, restoring the voice of the dead, communicating with the underworld. That was necromancy. They shouted that priests were summoning demons, that it was the gate of Satan. Any European scholar who dared to translate or write about this ritual faced the risk of hanging or exile. But you and I know who the real accomplice here is. The real reason the Vatican went crazy wasn't that the ritual was evil. It was because it worked. It represented a massive foundation of knowledge about life, memory, and the soul over which the church had zero control. You see, voice is power. A silent person is someone easily ruled. And if the dead could actually speak, if the memories of thousands of years past were awakened, perhaps they would tell stories that no one in Rome wants to hear. Stories about a great truth that existed before the Bible was written, before the Roman Empire rose, and before submissive silence was elevated to the highest sacred morality. For an empire built on censorship, a voice rising from the darkness is the real threat. Listen, can you hear it? The echoes of Latin hymns moaning back from the dark domes of European cathedrals. Look at the massive crosses piercing the sky, casting shadows over millions of people kneeling. That picture is all too familiar to us, isn't it? But step back. Step back even further. Before any of that existed, before the concept of an exclusive church was born to dictate where your soul would go, there was something else. A character with the head of an ibis bird, hiding in his hand the most dangerous weapon in the universe, primal knowledge. His name was Thoth. When mentioning ancient Egypt, most of us are usually injected with images of frivolous gold-wrapped pharaohs or rotting mummies waiting for their day to rise in cheap Hollywood movies. But for the elite minds of that time, Thoth was not merely an inanimate statue to be knelt before. He was the architect of reality, the holder of the wheel of time, the one who personally wrote the first lines of code of this universe in the form of magic and spells. And those who followed him, oh, the priests of Thoth. They were absolutely not fat-bellied monks who only knew how to mutter prayers for rain or bless some wheat bushes in the field. No, they were the hackers of the ancient world. They were scholars, scribes, true mystics. Imagine for a bit where they worked, not in cathedrals filled with light. They were in deep, underground secret chambers, surrounded by cold stone walls and thousands of papyrus scrolls tinged by time. The air was thick with incense, the silence broken only by the scratching of pens and the flickering light of oil lamps. There, their task was not to read books. Their task was to decode and protect the language of creation. For the priests of Thoth, words were not a cheap communication tool like how we type on social media today. Words were physics. Write a spell correctly, pronounce a syllable accurately, and boom. You can bend reality, interfering with the laws of nature. And for many centuries, that deadly knowledge was passed from hand to hand, from one generation to the next, skillfully hidden behind seemingly harmless covers. A layer of symbols carved on rock walls, a nursery rhyme, a ritual song hidden in folklore. But As in every story about power that I've dissected for you on this dark history channel, a new ruler always appears, and that ruler usually doesn't like sharing the throne. When Christianity began to rise and stretch its tentacles of power across the empire, what did they see when they looked at Egypt? They didn't see religion. They saw an arsenal. The spells of Thoth were filled with things that would make the foundation of the church shake. Invocations that could pull the dead back from the underworld. Strange star maps capable of predicting historical events centuries in advance. Forbidden rituals claimed to open spiritual vision and awaken hidden dark areas within the human mind. For the church, that wasn't knowledge. It was a death sentence for their authority. Think about it. How can you force people to believe in a single book, to submit to a single deity, if they know how to communicate with the universe themselves? So, the propaganda machine went to work. The church slapped convenient labels on the priests, sorcerers, heretics, obedient servants of darkness. Some early Christian scholars, the master psychological manipulators of the time, even shamelessly fabricated that Thoth himself was actually just a demon in a cloak. Funny, isn't it? A demon teaching humans how to read, how to write, and how to think freely. And then, the smell of ash began to fill the air. The Great Purge officially opened. Flames consumed priceless scrolls. Magnificent temples were smashed to the ground. The names of the priests of Thoth were brutally chiseled off tomb walls, as if erasing a name on stone could whitewash an entire flow of history. The church wanted them to disappear completely. But you know, knowledge is like water. You block this way, and it will silently seep through other cracks. Some priests were smart and sharp enough to foresee the bloodbath coming. They immediately went underground. They disguised their core teachings under the cloak of Greek philosophy, buried the most original texts in dark caves in the barren desert, and only passed on secrets through whispers in the night. That knowledge did not die. It flowed into the veins of later philosophers, seeped into the crucibles of early alchemists, people who were diligently using fragments from Thoth's teachings without even knowing what they were touching. The presence of the ibis-headed god never truly disappeared. It just went into the shadows. And this is the most interesting part, the part that always makes me smirk with a bitter smile whenever I think about it. The Vatican knows that. Oh, they know it very well. Imagine, deep beneath the magnificent marble stones of Rome, behind the cold iron doors of the secret archives, are the things that should have been burned. There, lying silently in the darkness, are documents mentioning Thoth by name. Spells written in ancient Coptic. Ghostly star charts that don't match any modern astronomical system. Papyrus pages so old that just your heavy breathing is enough to crumble them into fine dust. Do you see the hypocrisy here? The church did not destroy everything as they grandly claimed to the masses. They spared the finest parts, perhaps to study, perhaps to find a way to control that power. But certainly, 1,000 times certainly, not to share with you and me. Because deep down, this is the truth that no power system wants to say. The priests of Thoth believed that knowledge is sacred, that learning in itself is the highest form of worship, that curiosity is not original sin, but the only ladder that brings humans closer to the gods. The church was terrified of that, because if humans can discover the truth themselves, connect with the Supreme Being themselves, then why would they need robed guys standing at a pulpit acting as intermediaries to collect a faith fee anymore? Therefore, the priests of Thoth had to be erased from history, not because they were wrong, but because they remembered too much. Tonight, when this video ends, I want you to step outside and look up at the sky. What do you see? If you're like most modern people busy gluing your face to a screen, you'll just see stars. Giant balls of gas burning millions of light years away. Random, inanimate blinking dots scattered haphazardly into a cold, giant black hole. But let me take you back several thousand years. For the brilliant minds of ancient Egypt, the night sky was not a meaningless backdrop to gaze at on romantic nights. It was a massive secret code, a breathing, living matrix. They didn't just look at the stars the way we watch TV. They listened to them. They believed the universe was not silent. It was speaking through patterns, through mathematical orbits that were chillingly perfect. And if you want to read that cosmic language, you must know about one of the oldest, most powerful, and most wrongly accused symbols in human history, the serpent. Follow me deep inside the ruins of ancient Egyptian temples. Through dark, incense-choked corridors, look up at the massive stone ceilings. There, you will see them. Meticulously carved serpents, undulating and slithering across a simulated sky, drifting alongside constellations and planets. Don't be mistaken. They didn't carve those snakes on temple ceilings just for aesthetics. They weren't interior decorations. They were signposts, magical blueprints. For the priests, the serpent represented pure energy. It is flow. It is eternal transformation. It sheds its skin to be reborn. It slithers between dimensions, between the thin line of life and death, between the dust of the earth and the sacred vault of heaven, between the mortal body and the spiritual world. And here is the scariest part. When that serpent energy is connected to certain stars at specific times, it is no longer a symbol. It becomes a machine, a tool for exercising power. Egyptian priests were the engineers of the spiritual world. They fine-tuned their magical rituals to align perfectly with the movement of the constellations. They whispered the true names of distant stars in healing spells, believing those sounds would pull energy from the universe down to Earth. They built massive temples, not for show, but to create an exact mirror of the heavens above. Imagine this scene. You are standing in a secret temple vault. For 364 days a year, that room is plunged into absolute darkness. But then, on one single day, an astronomical event calculated precisely to the millisecond, a starbeam as thin as a razor blade pierces a tiny slit in the stone ceiling, diving straight down and brilliantly illuminating a statue or a sacred altar. That moment, boom. It's not just artistic symbolism, it is activation. The sky is plugging in and charging the ritual directly. And guess what? Our robed friends in Rome did not, absolutely not, like this one bit, understand the psychology of early Christianity. They were trying to sell the world a new story, that God is an omnipotent being residing in a far-off place, completely separate from the mundane stars. That looking up at the sky for power was pagan behavior, blasphemous, filthy heresy. So the guillotine of censorship fell again. Any Egyptian text that dared to open its mouth about astrology, cosmic timing, or using the serpent symbol to channel energy was relentlessly hunted down. Star maps were torn apart and declared books of the devil. And those sophisticated rituals regarding serpent energy, oh, the church pulled a dirty but extremely effective PR stunt. They renamed it reptile worship, distorting the image of the great serpent into an evil, cunning monster that tempted humans to eat forbidden fruit. But here is the truth that history has been robbed of. Egyptian priests were not so stupid as to kneel before slippery reptiles. They didn't worship planets like flying rocks. What they were doing was tuning in. They believed this universe is a giant living entity, that everything moves according to a certain rhythm and purpose. By understanding those patterns, you can tune yourself into the great flow of all things. You can heal your own wounds, liberate your mind, and even pick the locks to open the dark rooms hidden inside your soul. And do you know what terrified the church most? It was that audacious idea that a tiny human being could reach out on their own and access the divine power source of the universe without permission. No priest needed, no confession needed, no intermediary. For an organization craving absolute control over billions of souls, that was a nightmare. Therefore, the Vatican acted to erase that knowledge. Or at least, they tried. How ironic and ridiculous it is that fragments of that cursed knowledge survived, and do you know where they're hiding? Right in the heart of the enemy. Look at the earliest Christian symbols. The image of the bronze serpent wrapped around Moses' staff. The brilliant halo composed of stars surrounding the head of the Virgin Mary. Or even the most sacred holiday, Christmas. Do you really think its falling exactly on the winter solstice cycles was a random, snow-covered coincidence? Don't be so naive. Those are the fingerprints of ancient Egyptian star rituals, casually hiding in plain sight. Today, with giant machines and space telescopes, modern scientists are gasping in awe as they discover how advanced Egyptian astronomy really was. The fact that they tracked the star Sirius with minute-by-minute precision is still a slap in the face to the pride of modern science. They built an entire civilization, a perfect calendar based on the pulse of the stars. But science only sees numbers. What the Egyptians didn't write down, what was only whispered from the lips of one priest to the ear of another in the darkness of ritual, is the feeling. How did those stars make them feel? In those moments of perfect light alignment, what dimension did their eyes see? What forces did they fear? And what sleeping thing did they awaken? Perhaps part of it was just psychological technique. But there is one thing I am certain of. The Egyptians weren't just observing the stars. They were actually talking to them. And in Rome right now, the Vatican, despite proudly sitting under grand domes painted with images of angels flying in the sky, has never and will never be ready to admit just how great the truths were that those whispers from the ancient Egyptian stars once conveyed. Let's do a little experiment. Take a Bible off the shelf, dust off the cover, and flip through the familiar pages. What do you see? A frail infant hidden in a wicker basket drifting on a river. A great god who dies and then grandly rises from the underworld. Gentle river water suddenly turning into thick, bright red blood. Terrifying plagues descending, bringing a pitch-black darkness that swallows an entire kingdom. We are always taught that, oh, these are the heroic and exclusive epics of faith, pure revelation. But as your guide through the dark corners of history, I advise you this. Pick up a magnifying glass. Go back far enough in time. Strip away the flashy Latin words, dig through the Greek translations, and peel back the ancient Hebrew scriptures. When you reach the bottom layer of this religious sediment, what do you think you'll find? Not Jerusalem. You will find Egypt, long, yes, very long before the scribes of the Bible began grinding their ink. Egyptian myths were already being told fluently. Stories of gods walking the earth, of births of cosmic proportions, of great floods that cleanse the world, and of magical words that could shape reality itself. For ancient Egyptians, these weren't fairy tales to put children to sleep. They were memories. They were history. They were a survival manual. And for thousands of years, these stories didn't just sit on cold tomb walls. They were meticulously and exquisitely transcribed onto papyrus scrolls, safely hidden in massive libraries that most of the underworld never had a chance to behold. Then something changed. When early Christianity began to expand, it was hungry. Like a rising corporation wanting to monopolize the market, it began to absorb fragments of older traditions. Some were fine-tuned, some were renamed to fit the times, and some were rewritten. so subtly manipulated that if you weren't a detective well-versed in trickery, you would never recognize their true roots. Take the story of Horus as an example. Who was he? The son of the goddess Isis, miraculously born after she went to great lengths to collect every hacked-up piece of her husband Osiris's flesh. Horus was a child with a divine mission, protected by supernatural forces, growing up to confront the darkness and restore order to the world. Sound familiar? This script existed over 1,000 years before any gospel was born. Its structure isn't just familiar, it is too familiar. Or look at the great prophet Moses. A man who grew up in Egyptian luxury, came face to face with pharaohs, held a staff that could turn into a writhing serpent, and had the ability to part an entire ocean. Do you think these were merely creative storytelling choices by the biblical authors? No, these are fingerprints that haven't been wiped clean. They are echoes of Egyptian magic and myth recooked to serve a new audience. But be clear about this. This was not friendly borrowing. It was a large-scale theft and transformation of intellectual property. Egyptian ideas were deliberately integrated into the new religion, becoming solid foundation bricks. And as the kingdom of the Bible grew larger and more powerful, an unwritten rule emerged. The original roots must be eliminated. The church didn't want any meddling person comparing texts. They were extremely allergic to the prospect of some random scholar standing up and pointing out, "Hey, why do the Ten Commandments have the exact same structure as the Egyptian Book of the Dead?" Or that the concept of the final judgment is identical to the Hall of Ma'at, where the bloody heart of the dead is weighed against a fragile feather. So, the smear machine started up. Egypt was quickly molded into a land of sin, a realm of filthy idols, false gods, and damned souls. Priceless scrolls were labeled heretical. But funnily enough, you can't cut off the roots when you're standing on the tree itself. Even today, if you are subtle enough to listen to the parables or the Psalms, you will still feel the pulse of an ancient language whispering underneath. The language of the Nile priests. The language that once called the soul eternal and viewed the universe as a breathing organism. Still, don't believe me? Think I'm inflating a conspiracy theory? Then pack your suitcase and come with me to the very lair of power, St. Peter's Square in Rome. Stand right in the middle of that square. Around you are majestic marble colonnades, statues of saints looking down, and millions of tourists crowding in every year. But look at the centerpiece. In the very heart of the most sacred and powerful space in the Catholic world is not a giant cross. It is not a statue of Christ. It is a monolithic Egyptian obelisk, weighing hundreds of tons and 4,000 years old. It wasn't born in Rome. It was uprooted from Heliopolis, the city of the sun all the way in Egypt. Once upon a time, it stood proudly in the temple of the sun god Ra, and yet now its sharp shadow falls across the heart of the Vatican. Most tourists walk by, grinning for a selfie, never bothering to wonder why a ruin of heretical pagans is planted so prominently here. The truth, as always, is much darker and stranger. This obelisk is not a piece of feng shui decoration. Originally, Roman emperors looted it as bloody spoils of war. But when Christianity took power, instead of smashing this pagan symbol, the church kept it. They protected it. And then, in the 1500s, a hair-raising event occurred. The church decided to move it. But they didn't just call workers to carry it away. They dug deep into the earth. They performed astronomical measurements and secret rituals before standing it upright once more. The entire architecture of the square was redesigned just to revolve around this Egyptian stone axis. Why? In ancient Egypt, obelisks were not monuments. They were spiritual antennas. Capped in gold, they served to attract cosmic energy and divine light. connecting the Earth directly to the sky. So what happens when the Vatican, the organization that hates Egyptian magic most in the world, spends massive effort to plant a giant spiritual antenna right in the middle of its power center? In the underground world of historians, people constantly whisper about a terrifying secret. Beneath the Vatican obelisk is a vault sealed with lead and spells. Rumor has it that before the stone pillar was erected, church engineers discovered something buried deep under the Roman soil, not a Roman relic, not a Christian relic, but an Egyptian ruin. Perhaps a secret chamber for ancient rituals, or even more crazily, the hiding place for one of the lost books of the god Thoth himself. Of course, the Vatican is silent. No one, let me repeat, no one is allowed to bring a shovel to excavate this area. All documents regarding the relocation of the obelisk in the 16th century have been suspiciously blurred. They can hide paperwork, but they cannot hide the truth standing tall in broad daylight, that Christianity did not erase Egypt. It was built on top of Egypt, every stone, every symbol, every story, until the only thing left to accuse them all is a primal obelisk, standing straight, silently piercing the sky, patiently waiting. Because even if buried under thousands of years of lies, some memories, one way or another, will always find a way to slither toward the light. When you hear the word censorship, what do you think of? Cheaply cut movie scenes in theaters? Books banned by dictators fearing a few rebellious lines? Oh, put those naive thoughts away. Today, on this Dark History channel, I will show you the true form of censorship. It isn't loud. It doesn't need to burn books in the middle of a square to show off. The most cruel and powerful ban in human history targets something seemingly most harmless: translation. Lying deep within the stifling, mold-choked archives of the Church is a decree that has existed for centuries, quietly strangling history. It is called the Seal of Silence, Enfong Imlang. You've never heard of it, have you? Of course not. That is its entire purpose. This decree was never shouted by majestic popes from the windswept balconies of St. Peter's Square. It is a poison whispered between bishops, top scholars, and secretive archivists. It contains a blacklist of manuscripts that must absolutely not be touched. Works that, if you are unlucky enough to translate or copy, your reward would be excommunication at best. And at worst, well, let's just say you would disappear without leaving a single bone. And guess what sits proudly at the top of that death list? That's right, Egyptian texts. But not some songs praising the Nile or ledgers for calculating wheat. The targets of the Seal of Silence are things capable of collapsing theological foundations. Papyrus scrolls containing practical magic, superior astronomical maps, and most especially, fragments of the legendary Book of Thoth. They contain the hidden laws of nature's operation, divine geometric blueprints, and most chillingly, resurrection rituals. For ancient authors, these weren't fiction. They were tools. For the Vatican, they were time bombs. The Church has a fatal flaw. They are used to having a monopoly on knowledge. They strike the gavel to decide which story is sacred and which is pagan trash. But these Egyptian scrolls refuse to obediently follow that script. They whisper of entities that were once gods, of souls gliding through cosmic stargates instead of waiting at the pearly gates of heaven, of magic that isn't stained with evil, but radiant with divine light. And what makes the Church's blood run cold? Many of those ideas perfectly reflect Christian doctrine, yet were born millennia before Christianity. Silencing them used to be as easy as pie. Hieroglyphs had been dead for over 1,000 years. No one could read or understand those bird drawings or strange eyes. But then, the Vatican's nightmare arrived in the 1800s. When minds like Champollion found the key to decoding hieroglyphs, a shrill alarm blared through the underground corridors of Rome. Suddenly, those inanimate, dusty scrolls came to life. They began to speak. Immediately, the seal of silence was slammed down ruthlessly. Translators wanting to access documents had to undergo a rigorous screening process by the church. Independent scholars who strayed too deep into translating ancient star rituals suddenly found their careers ruined, publishers turning their backs in unison, or their manuscripts mysteriously evaporating. The seal of silence was never about words. It was the shackle of control. But if you think the church only knows how to sit at home and stamp censorship seals, you are dead wrong. Sometimes they have to send their hounds right into the tiger's den. Let's step back a bit to the 1600s. While Europe was busy tearing itself apart over theological debates and territorial disputes, a small ship quietly weighed anchor and headed toward the glowing golden sands of Egypt. On the deck was a group of men in simple black robes, crosses around their necks, eyes cold and sharp. On paper, they were pious missionaries going to sow the seeds of faith. But the truth? They didn't care about saving a single soul in that desert. They were the Jesuits, the most elite and secret intelligence army of the church, and their mission was to unearth something the Vatican had craved and feared for centuries. This was a top-secret expedition that history was not permitted to record. All I could pry out for you are shattered fragments, a few tattered letters tucked deep into a dark corner of an archive, a shipping declaration with names scraped off, and a single report written in complex code, permanently sealed. Their target wasn't the flashy pyramids that pepper the tourist maps. They pushed deep into dark Upper Egypt, into the blind spots of the world map, where locals still trembled and whispered about gods that should have been dead. These Jesuit ghosts held maps older than the Renaissance. They had coordinates, and they were hunting a legend, a lost underground library. Not the massive library of Alexandria that was burned. Rumor had it that before Alexandria fell, the true cream of the crop, books on ultimate magic, the geometry of the soul and resurrection, were secretly smuggled into the desert by the priests of Thoth. They were buried in an underground vault, locked with deadly puzzles and symbols. The rituals recorded within were so powerful that, just by pronouncing them aloud, something inside the structure of your reality would be permanently broken. And do you know the most terrifying part? It seems they found it. There is a spine-tingling clue that leaked out from a surviving diary entry. The scribbled lines describe a pitch-black, cold stone staircase plunging straight into the earth beneath the ruins of a collapsed temple. It speaks of stone walls carved with engravings that defied all attempts at translation. And then, a white space, an interruption. For a month and a half, the diary was left completely blank, not a single line, not a single note. What happened in the darkness of that vault for 45 days? When the pen appeared again on the page, the tone of the proud monk was gone. In its place was extreme panic, a shattered horror. There was one sentence written over and over, pressed so hard it tore the paper. "We must not bring it back. We must not bring it back." Whatever they saw in the flickering light of that vault, it destroyed their minds. Not long after, the mission was aborted in panic. A few tattered ghosts dragged themselves back to Europe, silent until death. Others vanished into the desert forever. The Vatican quickly erased all evidence, locked all records, and burned the maps. They acted as if that ship had never existed. Why erase it so frantically? Because down there, those Jesuits encountered the most brutal truth. Knowledge never bows to dogma. They saw the root symbols that matched Christian visions perfectly, the magic spells that were the originals of the sacred sacraments in Rome. They saw the grand blueprint of the soul, a blueprint proving that humans could reach eternity on their own without a temple, without a pope, and without the permission of any organization. The past doesn't disappear, my friends. It is only hidden by those who fear it. Next time you see the grand domes of Rome, or hear eloquent sermons about the exclusive truth, remember the darkness beneath the Egyptian obelisk. Remember the missing month and a half of those Jesuit monks, and ask yourself, what scream is that silence trying to hide? The story begins in the 1800s. This scroll surfaced by chance inside a tightly sealed Jesuit archive. It didn't come alone. It was found alongside a diary written in a grotesque language, a coded mix of ancient Coptic and Latin. It was as if the person writing it was trying to scream the truth, but was too terrified to say it directly. Most scholars of the time just clicked their tongues, viewing it as a strange artifact, perhaps a forgery by some idle person. But there was one man, a monk specializing in paleography, who didn't think so. He began to study it, and what he found created shock waves that shook even the strongest walls of the Holy See. At first, everything looked normal. The winding Nile, the Valley of the Kings, even the pyramids were there, though drawn strangely small, as if the artist wanted to say they weren't the most important thing. But as the map stretched south, toward the land of the Black Pharaohs, everything changed completely. Entire massive temple complexes appeared, labeled with names that didn't match any locations we know. There were landmarks in places that today are just flat lands, without a single piece of ruin. Arrows pointed straight to locations deep beneath giant sand dunes. And here is the most spine-chilling part. Some points were circled in red ink, the color of blood, the color of danger, and in the margin a single word was scribbled, as if written in a panic: Silere, Latin for be silent. Silent about what? Silent with whom? Why would the church, the organization claiming to be the holder of truth, keep a map demanding silence? There is a theory much darker than stories of pharaonic treasure. These weren't just temples. They were cathedrals of forbidden knowledge, places where ancient Egyptian priests performed rituals so secret that even the pharaohs didn't dare mention them publicly. These weren't tourist sites or tombs. They were repositories for scrolls, knowledge, and spells related to the movement of the stars and the architecture of the soul. Things that early Christian scribes called dangerous, heretical, dark magic. The red circles seemed to confirm that. Each circled location corresponded to an ancient story or a fragment found in forbidden texts. A hall of mirrors said to reflect divine truth, or the truth of the one looking into it. A buried hall said to contain the remains of a divine king who never dies. A sanctuary said to have been built with sound, not stone. Sounds like fantasy, doesn't it? The church wants you to think so too. But when modern archaeologists tried to visit some of those sites, they found nothing. Just empty desert, flat land. Does the story end there? No. That's when things get interesting. Satellite imagery later revealed strange patterns beneath the surface. Massive foundations, grid shapes, complex structures. They were too precise to be a coincidence of nature. Something is there, something massive. But when researchers requested permission to excavate, the doors were slammed shut decisively. The Egyptian government refused access without a valid reason. The Vatican scholars? They just smiled and offered silence, exactly as the map requested. The original map? It disappeared back into the archives, except for copies made illegally and silently passed around in the underground world. And now, a few researchers are following those paths. Not to dig, for they know they will be stopped. But to listen, to feel, to stand where memory still lingers in the stone and sand. Because perhaps the map wasn't just to find lost temples. Perhaps it was to find what the church feared they would teach. The church isn't afraid of broken stone. They are afraid of ideas. And Egypt is full of ideas that can change the world. Rome, the eternal city, a place where every stone is soaked in the blood of martyrs and sacred prayers. But sometimes the earth cannot forever keep the secret stuffed down its throat. Everything truly fell apart starting from a collapsed tunnel. A mild earthquake rippled through Rome, a shiver of the earth, and accidentally tore a rift in one of the forgotten catacombs beneath the city. A few unlucky workers were sent underground to assess the damage. And believe me, what they found wasn't just a few cracked walls or boring saintly bones. A completely sealed room. Not on any of the Vatican's architectural maps. It was hidden behind layers of soil and dead prayers. And sitting right in the middle of the room was a sarcophagus. Not a monotonous cedar coffin of Christianity, my friend. It was a sarcophagus plated in gold leaf, carved all over with symbols. And guess what? It absolutely wasn't Latin. They were Egyptian hieroglyphs. You think they'd call archaeologists or hold a press conference? Good joke. The Vatican sealed this site with a speed that even the mafia would envy. Within hours. No press release. Not a single official admission. This should have been buried forever, if not for a few details leaked by those who couldn't keep their mouths shut. Under the strict supervision of eyes in black robes, the sarcophagus was opened. Inside was a body, not a corpse stolen from the black market to satisfy some eccentric collecting hobby. This body was preserved to a state of perfection, mummified with the ultimate techniques, wrapped in linen layers imprinted with the royal seals of Egypt. This person was placed here intentionally, sleeping right at the feet of the Christian Holy See, just a few steps from the oldest catacombs of the apostles. Autopsy signs showed extreme care, the kind of privilege reserved only for pharaohs. Internal organs were removed, fragrant resin was poured over the dry skin, and amulets were placed precisely on the chest to protect the soul from judgment. But set the corpse aside. Look at the toys buried with him. A scroll case containing fragments of hieratic text, a dagger inlaid with deep blue lapis lazuli, with bloody prayers to Thoth, the god of magic and knowledge, carved on the blade. And in the withered hands of the mummy, he was clutching a small statue of Osiris, lord of the underworld. Why? Why would a pharaoh or a high priest of pagan Egypt lie beneath the most sacred city of Christianity? Some believe he was smuggled through the bloody crusades, but I think differently. The scroll fragments accompanying him speak of a bridge of breath and a gate of stars beneath the black sun. Sound familiar? It matches the Egyptian Book of the Dead perfectly, and ironically, it also appears in early Christian texts before being ruthlessly hacked out of the Bible by the popes. Could it be that this wasn't a hiding of spoils, but a covenant? A dirty deal between the early church fathers and corrupt Egyptian priests? Silence in exchange for power, the merger of magic and theology. Just look up at the paintings in the catacombs. Winged figures, blazing sun discs, radiant halos. Do you think they were naturally born in Rome? No, they belong to Egypt. They have always been there, parasitizing the new faith, and the Vatican is terrified. They aren't afraid of the dry corpse. They are afraid of what that dead man represents. That magic and the rite of resurrection are not opposed to faith, but that they are one. Let's move above ground for a moment, back to the dark centuries, where silent monks copied the Bible by hand, day after day, year after year. The slightest mistake, and they would be whipped and forced to rewrite from the beginning. Most of us think of them as pious, obedient servants of the church. But you are dead wrong. Some of them were playing a dangerous game right under the Pope's nose. Hidden between the lines of Psalms and Gospels, they were weaving magic. Scholars call them glosses, tiny notes scribbled in the margins of manuscripts. On the surface, they look like harmless commentary. But if you know how to look, they mention the name Thoth. They describe rituals for summoning angels steeped in pagan colors. Some were even bold enough to copy a spell from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, but cunningly changed the cover using Christian terminology. You're praying to Jesus? Are you sure? Because the structure of that prayer was designed to summon something much more ancient and darker. Why would the servants of the Lord do that? Because they weren't stupid. Some had studied in Alexandria, had touched the scrolls before they were tossed into the fires of heresy. They knew knowledge was sacred, regardless of its origin. When ordered to burn magic, they didn't. They encoded it. They hid the names of the old gods in Latin acrostics. Some even used invisible ink, formulas whispered during dark nights, lemon juice, vinegar, and sometimes blood. The page looked completely harmless to the eyes of the cardinal bishops. But hold it over a flame, and boom, an entire universe of ancient magic appears. A 9th century manuscript contains a prayer to the light bringer who passes through the 12 gates. That phrase is not in the Bible, my friend. It belongs to the pharaohs. Of course, no secret stays hidden forever. The church eventually caught the scent of treason. Monasteries were raided in the night. Books were confiscated. The monks who dared to hide magic in the Word of God were silenced forever. Some were burned alive at the stake, their flesh crackling alongside the parchment scrolls. Others simply evaporated into thin air. But they couldn't burn it all. A few manuscripts survived, bleeding and ashen, smuggled out, silently waiting in private collections. They stand there as a mockery of Vatican censorship. That there was a time when the hands praising God were also the hands whispering spells to the stars. And to deal with this cursed persistence, the church had to create a weapon more ultimate than fire, a dark blacklist that could swallow history itself. Index Librorum Prohibitorum. Sounds like a dark spell straight out of the pages of Harry Potter, doesn't it? But I bet you the truth is more brutal and bloody than any work of fiction. It is real. It is the official list of prohibited books of the church, the pages you are not allowed to read, the words you are not even permitted to think. For over 400 years, this list was like an invisible monster, constantly updated, bloating, and silently swallowing human knowledge. And do you know what was buried alive under its ashes? Not just Galileo's science, but the Egyptian texts, ancient scrolls, translations of magic spells, manuscripts that had resiliently survived the destruction of fire and desert, only to be extinguished by a stroke of the Vatican's red ink. Now, let me make one thing clear. These texts do not contain instructions for summoning Satan. They are not bloody curses or sacrificial rituals. Not at all. They are prayers offered to the sun. They are subtle guides for healing the soul. They are detailed maps of the afterlife, written thousands of years before the first letter of the Bible was born. But what did the church see? They didn't see wisdom. Paranoia made them see only competition. These books refused to bend to the narrow timeline of Christianity. They didn't tell the story that the Vatican wanted the world to hear. And so the sentence was passed. Death to the ideas. At the top of this God status list is the Book of Thoth, a collection of magical teachings said to be the key to unlocking the language of the divine. The church didn't just ban it, They hunted it like a wild beast. Copies were relentlessly pursued and thrown into furnaces. Even quoting it in another book would cost you your life. But, like everything else forbidden, it lives on. Fragments of it lurk in the basements of dusty museums, smuggled into the private libraries of the aristocracy. And on every surviving copy, a bone-chilling warning is scribbled by hand in blood or ink. Do not translate. Do not share. Do not awaken. Visual. An old-style animation recreates the Egyptian weighing of the heart, then slowly fades into the Last Supper and the Day of Judgment. Next is the ritual of coming forth by day, or the trendier name we call it today, the Book of the Dead, an Egyptian travel manual for the underworld. When Vatican scholars first read it, they broke out in a cold sweat. It was too familiar, too Bible-like. It spoke of a trial judging the soul, of placing the heart on the scales of truth, of a soul standing trembling before a council of divine judges. These scenes recur identically, sometimes word for word, in the Christian book of Revelation. You see the problem now? The copycat began to fear the original would expose them. Thus, the Book of the Dead was tossed straight into the prohibited catalog. Then come the medical papyri. The Egyptians healed by blending herbal knowledge with magical spells. To them, body and soul were one. You had to heal both. But the church had a monopoly version of medicine, a dry version with no room for magic. Consequently, these manuscripts containing life-saving knowledge were labeled heresy and locked away in the dark. Better to let patients die than let them live through the magic of a pagan. And here is the most spectacular flip of all. You thought the list of prohibited books was abolished in the 1960s? Yes, on paper. But there are texts that have never been removed from the black list. They still lie there, behind the fortified walls of the Vatican, hermetically sealed. Not because they represent evil, but because once you read them, the historical narrative you once believed in will collapse. And perhaps that is the real magic the Holy See still trembles to mention. But hiding books is one thing. Hiding a god is a much harder problem. Let's talk about the one named Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the Thrice Great, a name that once sent tremors through temples and scrolls, causing headaches for countless secret societies. The Greeks called him Hermes. But long before that, the Egyptians called him Thoth, the lord of writing, magic, and all hidden knowledge. Who was he? A man of flesh and blood? A god? Or both? Whatever he was the messenger of divine truth, and his words were so sharp they could cut through the church's strings of manipulation. His collection of Hermetica taught that this universe is a unified whole, that all things are connected, that the divine spark is not sitting up on the ninth cloud waiting for you to beg, but resides right inside you. True knowledge comes from looking inward. Does this idea sound familiar? Perhaps because these golden words were rehashed by early Christian authors, renamed and stripped of their original Egyptian shell to be claimed as their own. During the Renaissance, when great minds like Marsilio Ficino unearthed the Hermetica and translated it into Latin, how did the church react? Ridiculously, they applauded at first. They naively believed the Hermetica was written around the same time as Moses, so it was safe, ancient, and respectable, until someone realized the bitter truth. These texts did not spring up at the same time as or after the Bible. They preceded it, long before it, and they were not of elegant Greek origin as they thought. They smelled of the silt of the Nile. They pointed straight south toward Egyptian priestly sects that had existed thousands of years before the name Rome appeared on a map. The Vatican turned on them immediately. The supportive attitude vanished in a blink, replaced by a brutal purge campaign. Suddenly, the harmless books became enemy number one. Scholars who once praised Hermes were labeled heretics. Some were excommunicated, others were forced to swallow their words. The Vatican began its familiar game of rewriting history. New translations were mercilessly trimmed. The divinity in the Hermetica, which originally possessed both male and female natures, not allowed. It had to be corrected to be entirely male. Mention of reincarnation and the unity of life, wiped out, replaced with words reeking of doctrines of obedience. And the final, most cowardly move, they declared that Hermes had never existed. They claimed he was just a patched-up myth, a silly mistake of history. Erase the messenger, and the message will die prematurely. Quite convenient, isn't it? But as I've said, truth is a very hard monster to kill. Thoth still stands tall at the center of the Hermetica. His message survived, encoded in the movement of the stars, in the sacred geometry of the temples, in the whispers of the desert wind. The church had to exhaust itself to distort the image of Thoth, because he didn't just challenge a line or two of doctrine. He challenged the entire timeline, exposing their authority and toppling their monopoly on truth. And in an empire built entirely on control, that is a terminal threat. Let's leave the stifling marble halls of Rome to return to where everything began, the sand. Somewhere deep in the Egyptian desert, buried beneath the ruins of an ancient Coptic monastery, a scroll was found. It was crisp, charred, but what remained on it, well, it was enough to give any cardinal a heart attack. It told the story of a priest, but he wasn't an ordinary pious sheep. He was one who walked between two worlds, a warlock priest. This man uttered the commandments of Christ in one sentence and muttered the spells of Thoth in the next. He healed not just with hollow prayers, but with ancient magical formulas pulled from collapsed temples. He called upon Christian angels and Egyptian gods in the same breath because to him, they were just different names for the same force. The church called it the ultimate blasphemy. In whispered conversations behind closed doors, they called it the gospel of the warlock. Do you see the threat here? This gospel didn't tell a story of a Christianity coming to purge Egyptian paganism. It told a story of blending. That priest wrote that the Nile and the Jordan shared the same source, that the story of Osiris being murdered and reborn was the first draft of the story of Christ, that Egyptian magic was not destroyed by the first Christians, it was stolen, used, and hidden by them. That is why the scroll had to disappear. It is rumored that Vatican agents posed as antique collectors to buy it out with cash, or confiscated it by force. Either way, the gospel evaporated, and, coincidentally, the monastery where it was found was engulfed in flames a year later. The monks there? No one ever saw them again. Coincidences in the Vatican always carry the smell of burning flesh. If you ask a tour guide at the Vatican about the secret museum, they will laugh and say, "You watch too many fantasy movies." Don't believe them. It is real. It lies deep beneath the designer shoes of the tourists, an archive that isn't on any map. Only the Pope and high-ranking exorcists are allowed to pass through that iron door. They call it a museum, but I call it a prison, a dungeon for objects too powerful to be burned and too dangerous to be displayed. Why don't they destroy them? Because Rome's arrogance always comes with cowardice before the forces they cannot control. Here sits a smooth black stone slab containing a timeline, a completely different flow of history, where lost years and alternative truths are carved in gold. The rare few who dare to read it either go mad or renounce their faith. And there is a ring locked in a lead box, passed in secret from one pope to the next. On the ring is carved a serpent swallowing the sun, the ring of a priest of Thoth. Legend says that if this ring is returned to its rightful temple, the cycle will restart. Magic will rise. That is why it is kept under house arrest. Here, knowledge is not power. Knowledge is the ultimate terror. But let me show you what truly makes the Vatican break a sweat. Deepest in the library is a document locked in a box of cedar and silver. It isn't a book. It is a bloody warning. It mentions a name that both Egyptian history and the Church want to chisel away: Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh, the one who dared to topple the entire system of gods to worship a single entity. But the problem wasn't his religion. The problem was what followed his name. This document records a terrifying law. Every time Akhenaten's name is mentioned too many times, or when his artifacts are brought to light, a wave of death sweeps through. An unexplainable illness. Pale skin, cloudy eyes, people collapsing for no reason. It describes the shadow of the sun disk and the soul-stealing breath. In the 1800s, an explorer accidentally dug up a sealed box from the ruins of Akhenaten's city. Inside was a tablet engraved with bizarre characters. The person who opened it died within 3 days, blood gushing from every orifice. His assistants were permanently blinded. The Vatican silently swallowed that box, hid it away, and issued 3 absolute underground rules for exorcists. Do not call his name too often. Never read the tablet aloud. Do not let his image touch the sunlight. They knew the god Akhenaten worshipped was not the sun. It was a non-human entity, older than any god, and it is still listening. The curse is not superstition. It is hibernating, waiting for some fool to wake it up. But if you ask me, what is the most destructive weapon in this entire holy see? Not the mummy, not the curse, but this scroll, the scroll of light. It does not contain deadly spells. On the contrary, it speaks of a kind of sacred energy, a real, living force that flows through all things. The scroll details the postures, tones, and geometric frequencies so that the human body can attract this source of light. And here is the line that made the entire foundation of the Vatican tremble. He who speaks the word with truth shall become the Son incarnate in flesh. Do you realize the deadly danger of that statement? If this scroll is real, it means that divinity is not the exclusive privilege of Jesus. Sacred energy does not descend from the sky through the hands of a pope or a priest. You do not receive the light, you become it. The scroll teaches, the temple is oneself, the altar is the heart. The light is already here. You have simply forgotten how to use it. And that, my friend, is why it was buried. Not because it was demonic, but because it sets you free. The church built itself as the exclusive gatekeeper of heaven. They collect taxes. They demand obedience. They sell salvation. But if people realize they can awaken the divinity within themselves, then what do they need an intermediary organization for? If you are the temple, then the Vatican is just a pile of worthless marble. Deep inside the massive stomach of the Vatican, there was a man whose name history has carefully wiped clean with a rag. No pope, no cardinal, no silk robes at all. His name was Luca Verno, a low-ranking priest, a silent gear in the divine machine. Luca's job on paper sounded boring to the point of sleep, cataloging and preserving a special collection. But in the Vatican, the word special usually comes with the scent of danger. They called him the keeper of the vault, and the vault that Luca looked after, well, It wasn't just locked, friends. It was sealed, buried under tons of massive boulders. And most uniquely, it was lined with gold leaves. Why gold? For moisture proofing? Or because the ancients believed gold was the only metal that could imprison supernatural entities? I'll let you reflect on that yourself. Inside that vault, there were no crosses, no rotting bone fragments of martyred saints, nor was there the Holy Grail. The things lying on those wooden shelves were older, stranger, and much darker. They belonged to the dust of ancient Egypt, things that a monotheistic religion should have thrown straight into the fires of heresy. But no, they kept them. Quite hypocritical, isn't it? Look at this inventory list. Zorro flips through an old leather notebook, dust flying everywhere. A ring engraved with a falcon. The metal seemingly never oxidizes, never ages. A small vial of oil, rumored to be able to burn fiercely without a wick, defying all the laws of thermodynamics you learned in school. A heavy black stone, densely engraved with spells in both Coptic and hieroglyphs. And the centerpiece of the room, the queen of cursed objects. Zorro pauses, looks directly into the lens, eyes narrowing. A broken mirror. This mirror once belonged to a priestess of the Temple of Isis. Its fragments do not reflect light normally. The records state, when the light hits at the right angle, it displays more than just your reflection. Emphasize the word more. You look in the mirror and see someone who isn't you looking back, or do you see your own death, or do you see the infinite emptiness of the universe? Anyone who has ever looked into it has never wanted to share it again. And our Luca Verno? A diligent employee, never left the Vatican, never missed a comma in a report, and especially never asked questions. An absolutely obedient sheep. Until one night, his piety was defeated by something more sinister. Luca's diary, found later by the Vatican cleaning crew hidden in his private room's drawer, was unlike any inventory report. The yellowed pages were full of jumbled sentences. He wrote of whispers, scratching at his eardrums every time he stood with his back to the vault door. He described stifling dreams where his mind drowned in hieroglyphic symbols he didn't know how to read. A presence, that is the word he used. It didn't sit still on the shelf. It grew. It breathed the cold air every time he unlocked the vault. Luca started writing letters, not to the Pope or the cardinals. He wrote to himself. Letters filled with the desperate questions of someone gradually losing their mind. Why do we keep these things? Why not burn them? Why is the ring in a different position than yesterday, even though no one touched it? Why do I feel the thing in the vault has never slept but is only waiting? And then, the final diary entry. The words marking the end of a diligent priest. It wasn't a prayer for God's salvation. On the contrary, it was a bone-chilling confession. It was only 6 words long. It followed me home. 2 days later, Luca Verno was found dead in his bedroom. No stab wounds, no blood, no signs of a struggle, no poison, just a cold corpse with eyes wide open, staring into space. And on the floor, drawn with the very ash from the fireplace, was a strange symbol. Massive, distorted. Even the top ancient language experts of the church, those who could recite dead scriptures from thousands of years ago, had to shake their heads and turn pale. No one knew what it was. How did the Vatican handle this? Oh, you know, standard divine corporation workflow. Seal the room. Bury the body quietly in the night. Muzzle the witnesses. The vault was assigned to someone else, but this time, guarded by 2 exorcists on duty day and night. It's like using 2 bottles of water to put out a forest fire. Re-inventorying the warehouse, they discovered the most terrifying truth. not all objects were still there. Several things had evaporated. Officially, Luca Verno never held any special role, but in the narrow corridors, whispers still spread. Some said he went mad from loneliness. Others believed he had seen the heresy he wasn't allowed to see. But those who truly understood, they believed Luca had tried to use one of those things, or ironically and bitterly, one of them had used him. The rules of the game changed. Since that night, a blood rule was issued in the secret archives. No one is allowed to enter the vault alone. Father Luca became a living warning. And that vault? It still sits there. A gilded prison holding forgotten gods and memories that humanity should not touch. A festering wound bandaged by the church with absolute silence. But you know, silence never keeps a secret forever, especially when that secret knows how to speak. Do you know what the stupidest and also the most primal thing about humanity is? Curiosity. When someone places a closed box in front of you and labels it, "Do not open," your brain will itch until you pry that lid open. The church knows this. So somewhere in the lower levels of this Vatican archival labyrinth, there are shelves that are completely invisible. They don't appear on any architectural map. No nameplates, no Dewey Decimal Classification system. Just a series of meaningless numbers and letters, arranged in some paranoid logic to deceive those who accidentally pass by. And hidden on that nameless shelf are a few audio tapes. Dusty, worn out, no notes, no translations, just the word Coptic and a warning written in faded black ink, scribbled on the back of the box as if the writer were trembling. Do not listen when alone. You see, sounds exactly like the script of a B-grade horror movie, right? Anyone with a brain would step back, but there is always one who considers themselves an exception. Meet Matteo Morelli, a young Jesuit scholar, exceptionally brilliant and, of course, secretly arrogant. Matteo's job was to help digitize rotting parts of the archive. He was fluent in Greek, was swallowing Coptic grammar, and was morbidly obsessed with the mysteries of early Christian Egypt. One quiet afternoon, while sorting, his fingers touched those boxes. Did he ask for permission? Of course not. Rules are for the herd, and Matteo thought of himself as a shepherd. He simply pulled a tape out, threaded it through the slots of the player, and pressed the play button. According to what Matteo frantically recorded in his notebook later, the notebook found locked in his desk drawer. What slithered out of the speakers that day wasn't music. Much less was it a liturgical chant. It was something entirely different. He described it as a series of rhythmic chanting, so low it made the chest vibrate. It didn't follow any musical scale. It had its own law, rhythmic like the breathing of a sleeping monster, continuous like black waves hitting a rocky shore. Matteo wrote that he felt the sound didn't go through his ears. No. It pierced his skull and slithered straight in, talking directly to his mind. Not with words, but with rhythm. He only listened for exactly 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes of his life. What can you do in 5 minutes? Drink a cup of coffee? But for Matteo, those 5 minutes were enough to permanently lose himself. That night, Matteo bolted upright in bed. He screamed, but no one understood what he was saying. It was a language patched together with ghastly clicks, twisted tones, and broken pauses that made the listener's skin crawl. His roommate later testified with chattering teeth that the room that night was irrationally cold. A cold that couldn't be measured by a thermometer, but a cold that weighed down on every marrow of the bone, the cold of the underworld. The next morning, the Matteo Morelli they once knew was dead, even though his heart was still beating. The transformation was brutally fast. He stopped eating, Physical hunger seemingly no longer existed. He only slept fitfully for a few minutes, then bolted up, grabbed a pen, and wrote compulsively. Eyes sunken, skin and bones, Matteo declared to the terrified eyes around him. The voice on the tape had shown him a path of light piercing straight through the darkness. He growled that what he heard was older than the Bible, more ancient than Egyptian dust. That was the source. And of course, by this point, the Vatican's patience had run out. People in black robes but carrying no crosses appeared, swift and ruthless. All of Matteo's notes and notebooks were seized completely. The tapes were shoved back into the underground vault, sealed with a new, more complex, deeper code. And Matteo? The official report stated he was sent on long-term leave for health recovery, a fancy church way of speaking. Unofficially, the truth is, Matteo Morelli evaporated from humanity. No one ever saw him again. So what was that thing on the tape, actually? In deserted pubs, a few old, drunk archivists occasionally whisper about it. They say those recordings were made in the early 20th century, at a remote monastery all the way in Upper Egypt. The monks there didn't mumble the Lord's Prayer. They practiced something called sound magic, a secret heritage circulated in the dark for centuries. These chants were not born to praise God or honor the divine. They were keys. They were sophisticatedly designed to unlock, to pry open the closed doors in the listener's subconscious. Those ghostly frequencies interacted directly with memory, stimulated emotions, and distorted thinking. They reprogrammed the human brain. Do you see the irony here? Why didn't the Vatican toss those tapes into the furnace? Because they were demonic? No, they kept them because they work. Power is power, regardless of whether it comes from God or a demon. Right now, in silence, they still lie there, wrapped in protective cloth, surrounded by hair-raising warning barriers. Because the rulers of faith understand a cold truth. Some words are born to be written on paper, some words are born to be spoken, but a few things, just a few, are meant to be heard. And once you have heard them, they will never, never truly leave you. They will reside in your head, multiply and thrive, until you are no longer yourself. But if magic through sound scares you, prepare yourself, because the Vatican's cleaners don't just deal with tapes, they deal with things much more sentient. See you again. The Inquisition. When you hear this phrase, what image comes to mind? Monks in hooded robes, holding blazing torches, marching through town squares and pushing heretics onto pyres? Oh, my friend, don't naively think they've been buried by history. Not at all. Fires can go out, but the torchbearers never disappear. They just change their uniforms. Their target in this century isn't witches screaming blasphemies from cathedral steps. Their target is whispers, hidden things, ancient forces that shouldn't be allowed to breathe in our modern world, but in some morbid way, they continue to appear. The Vatican calls them Custodes Umbrae, the guardians of the shadow. Officially, administratively, they don't exist. No honored office, no tax ID, no public records. They operate under the direct instruction of a department deep, much deeper than the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. But imagine this. If a sealed box full of bloody Egyptian amulets washes up on a beach in Crete, or a hieroglyphic scroll begins sowing hallucinations in anyone who happens to read it. These are the ones who get the call. Who are they? Mostly priests, but don't confuse them with the benevolent parish priests who bless you on Sunday morning. They are multilingual machines. They are fluent in dead languages that humanity has forgotten. They are trained in monasteries not marked on Google Maps, apprenticing under desert mystics who claim to be descendants of the Temple of Thoth. When hunting, they wear civilian clothes. But inside that coat, there is always an item, a hidden relic, an ivory signet, or an ancient amulet. Why? Because the things they face never play by the rules. Take an example from a leaked file. A landowner in rural France reported finding a book in his private library. A book that whispered. The custodes team arrived. No sirens, no fanfare. 3 men, 2 women. All were theological experts and something else that no one dared to name. They entered that library. They recovered the book. But when they stepped out, there were only 4 people. 1 person had permanently remained in that room. The other 4 uttered absolutely not a single word. They filed a report, stamped it top secret, and vanished into the familiar silence. The church, of course, will boast that these agents are shields protecting humanity from toxic knowledge. But a defecting Jesuit priest once wrote a scarier truth. The custodes don't just seal magical texts, they burn them. That some rituals have touched too close to the core of the universe, to the point that the Vatican would rather bury the truth than let its exclusive power be shaken. And if you play with the fires of the underworld for too long, you will get burned. Whispered files talk about the transformation of these custodes. That exposure to these anomalous entities has planted things in their bodies that do not belong to humans. There are rumors of an agent who stopped aging entirely. Another was blinded, 2 eye sockets white and blank, but able to accurately describe every detail of an accident happening tens of miles away. You think magic died under the boots of science and satellites? Don't be so stupid. It only slipped through the cracks. And the Vatican isn't closing the ancient systems. They are just upgrading them to maintain control. Near Asyut, Egypt, archival records categorize this case under abnormal healing. Most miracle reports are fakes, bubbling holy water, statues weeping blood, cheap scams. But this case shook the top ranks of Rome. Why? Because the witness was a Jesuit medical observer. An 8-year-old boy had acute pneumonia. Every hospital sent him back to die. His lungs were failing, and no modern antibiotic could save him. His family had prepared a coffin, until an old monk, a recluse not seen for many years, walked in. In his hand was not a Bible. It was a scroll wrapped in tattered black cloth, sealed with opaque wax that looked even older than the foundation of the monastery. When the scroll opened, the Jesuit observer was stunned. The writing on it was not Arabic, not Coptic, much less Greek. It was an Egyptian language so ancient that its symbols seemed to be twisting like vines, pulsing rhythmically under the candlelight, like it was alive. The monk began to read. Hours passed. His voice never wavered, calm but suffocatingly powerful. Occasionally, he touched his finger to the boy's chest. The report recorded that the air in the room at that time thickened, so heavy it felt like the walls were pricking up their ears to listen. And then, a miracle happened. The boy opened his eyes. A cough rang out. The fever evaporated as if it had never existed. His breathing returned to normal. Within 24 hours, a child nearly taken by death could jump out of bed and walk. How did the Vatican react to this great miracle? Honor the monk? Bring the scroll to the temple? Of course not! Tyrannical silence immediately fell. The scroll was confiscated. The monk disappeared without a trace, as if swallowed into thin air. The monastery was forced to deny everything. And the Jesuit observer? Exiled to a God-forsaken region in Brazil. But before going, he managed to hide a letter. That letter read, The scroll did not just heal the body, it adjusted something deeper. The disease was not something physical. It was an entity clinging to the boy from a place that is not human. What did that damn scroll actually do? The official Vatican report only recorded one curt, cruel sentence: ritual unverified, non-Christian origin. No further action recommended. They lied. Behind closed doors, that scroll was dissected. Only the 3 most powerful humans were permitted to read it. And the outcome? One had to enter a mental institution for constantly foaming at the mouth, hallucinating about radiant entities. The second threw away his priest's robes and fled. The third left exactly one line of note in the margin. The words still carry a charge. They didn't burn the scroll. It is lying somewhere, wrapped in black cloth, locked in an underground vault, classified as a relic of concern, not because they fear its power, but because they cannot control it. And for the Vatican, that is more terrifying than the devil, because if an ancient scroll from pagans can bring life to the incurable, then what else are they hiding? The monopoly on miracles has been broken, and the question is, who is the one who truly has the right to decide what this world is permitted to remember? Imagine this scene. The year is 1954, a tiny, silent chapel in southern Italy. Police and local bishops break down the door, and what do they find? Father Lucien Morelli, a man who spent his whole life in obedience, never once daring to question a single semicolon in the catechism. Now he is kneeling before a shattered mirror. His hands are drenched in blood. His eyes are wide, drained of life, and completely unblinking. What did he see? It all began when Lucien accidentally smashed a fake brick wall in the church basement and found an Egyptian scroll. It had no label. It wasn't in any archive. The ink on the paper, well, according to the accounts, it shimmered under the candlelight as if it were trying to breathe. At first, the naive priest thought it was a prayer for peace, but no. That scroll didn't teach people how to talk to God. It taught people how to see, not to see with these mundane eyes, but with something deeper. Its instructions were chillingly simple. Light a candle, place a mirror on the wall, draw a circle around it, and read those words aloud. But at the end of the scroll, there was a single line written in ink as red as blood. Do not ask to see your own era. Of course, humans always do exactly what they are forbidden to do. Lucien performed that ritual. What happened next isn't recorded in any official Vatican file, but the witnesses, nuns standing outside the door, recounted it in absolute horror. They said the room suddenly fell into an absolute silence, a silence so profound one could hear the blood flowing in their veins. The candle flame froze, not flickering at all. The air pressed tight against the walls as if it were trying to find a way to escape. And then the mirror turned black. Not the black of shadows, but the black of an infinite void, an absence of everything. Just before the mirror exploded into thousands of shards, Father Morelli uttered only one sentence. They lied about the beginning. And that was it. A pious mind was crushed. He was never himself again. No sleep, no food. Lucien babbled about days that didn't exist, names that the authorities had erased from history. He used his bloody fingernails to claw Egyptian symbols into the walls. The Vatican immediately locked down the church, threw him into a mental asylum in Rome, and claimed to have burned the scroll. But what about the mirror? It is carefully stored in the Archivum Secretum, labeled as a non-usable relic. My friends, seeing the future is already a curse. But seeing the truth behind the veil of time, seeing the true origin of the world, that is enough to drive even the most devout person insane. And if you think scrolls or mirrors are the only things the Vatican is hiding, you are dead wrong. Let's return to those heretical sounds. Initially, the clergy called it by a medical-sounding name to lessen the fear, auditory distortion phenomenon. But the cleaners all knew exactly what it was. It began with a wax cylinder recording taken from a Jesuit collection in Alexandria. On the label was a desperate line in Latin, "Do not play aloud." Unfortunately, the scholar who found it had failed Latin. He turned it on. Exactly 2 minutes later, he collapsed on the floor, foaming at the mouth. When he woke up in a high-security church clinic, he claimed he had levitated, seeing his own corpse from above. He described colors that don't exist in the spectrum and babbled in an alien language. The Vatican immediately confiscated the wax cylinder, tossing it into a fortified, soundproof vault. But the trouble didn't stop there. When they tried to copy this sound onto modern formats, the machines began to go crazy. It wasn't a software error. Lights flickered, equipment caught fire, cables overheated. One technician was permanently deafened in both ears for 5 days just because he accidentally heard a leaked snippet. Eventually, they had to use a proprietary electromagnetic lab just to store it. What did that chant contain? Linguists broke into a cold sweat when they realized it was fragments of Coptic and pre-dynastic Egyptian. Its rhythm was extremely hypnotic, but the scariest point lay in the frequency. 111 hertz. That is the death number. The number that perfectly matches the frequency used in ancient meditative rituals to simulate a near-death experience. At this frequency, your brain is stripped of its alertness, drifting into the thin boundary between dream and reality. In that sleepwalking state, every suggestion becomes a belief, and belief will bend reality. Do you understand why the church was so terrified of this? Because it breaks their monopoly. If a mere sound clip can change perception, implant memories, and brainwash humans, then what is the Bible for? What are the sermons for? It bypasses all doctrine. It smashes control. A single chant can bring you closer to the divine than 10 years of kneeling in confession. Of course, forbidden things always find a way to leak out. Patchwork versions of this chant have slithered into the underground world. Through experimental music artists, through ambient soundscapes floating on anonymous websites. Those who listen for too long begin to have nightmares of Egyptian temples, experience out-of-body travel, and hear the same voice whispering in their heads, "This is how we remembered." Right now, deep underground, in a top-secret facility codenamed Aquila, top monks and scientists are sitting side by side. They aren't holding crosses. They are wearing headphones. They watch brain scans light up like Christmas trees. Because they have realized a bitter truth. Sound is not just a physical vibration, it is a door. And that door is starting to open. Early scholars called it the language of heaven, a pure sound untainted by a profane tongue. But when they cross-referenced it with apocryphal texts, those books ruthlessly excluded from the original Bible, a shocking secret was exposed. Those words weren't Greek, not Hebrew, not Aramaic. They looked exactly like ancient Egyptian. The names of the angels they prayed to, the rhythmic structure, even those strange gasping syllables, perfectly matched the invocations that the priests of Karnak and Abydos once used to summon the god Thoth and the goddess Isis. Let that truth sink into your head. The church burned thousands of people alive for the sin of idol worship. But at the deepest core of the religion, the angels they are summoning bear the faces of the ancient Egyptian gods. History isn't buried, my friends. It is only renamed and locked in the dark. Next time you stand before a mirror in the middle of the night, or when you hear a strange ringing in your ears, ask yourself, is God calling you, or is something much older waking up? Let's begin the next part with the Book of Enoch, an ancient mystical text full of visions of the heavens and angels. In this book, there is a detail that mainstream theologians always want you to skim over quickly. An angel who spoke in a language no one could understand. It existed as a block of dead text, a riddle locked by faith, until 21st century technology intervened, when curious researchers, and I bet they broke into a cold sweat, ran that angelic text through modern phonetic analysis and comparison software. The computer returned a result that made the walls in Rome shake. That divine code, the language supposedly flowing from the lips of astral messengers, matched with haunting precision the ancient spells, and not just ordinary spells. It matched syllable for syllable with 19th century transcriptions of Egyptian spells, the kind of sorcery specifically designed to guide lost souls through the dark underworld. Do you see the irony here? A spell used to crawl through the Egyptian hell has been recycled to become a ticket to send a soul to heaven in an ancient scripture. That is exactly what made the Vatican hold its breath. Imagine you are the holders of the supreme faith, and you realize, if the language of angels isn't an exclusive gift from the Almighty, but actually just a legacy inherited from the magic of a bunch of earthly pagan priests, then the entire chain of holy revelation will crack. The idea that the Word of God carries the echoes of a sun worship ritual is a direct slap to doctrine. So what did they do? Well, the survival instinct of religious empires is always very keen. These overlaps were quickly buried deep under layers of archival dust. They were dismissively rejected by scholars, calling them translation errors. Or worse, anyone who dared to dig too deep was slapped with the familiar label, heretic. However, my friends, truth is like water. The more you try to block it, the more it leaks from the most unexpected cracks. Deep inside the Vatican archives, where the air is thick with cover-ups, there is hidden a 4th century Coptic gospel. If you flip it open right at the first chant, you will see a phrase. This chant begs for protection, asks for clairvoyance beyond the sight of eyes, and demands direct communication with radiant entities. Sounds very pious, right? Except for one thing. It is almost an exact carbon copy of a section of the Egyptian prayer for the Eye of Horus. The church dressed those radiant entities in pristine white robes and called them angels. But the Egyptians were way ahead of them. They called those beings Naru, divine intelligences, winged entities with the ability to tear through space and move freely between realms. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Things start to get even weirder when you look at the drawings. If you sneak a look at the apocryphal manuscripts preserved in Syria, you won't see angels with soft, feathery wings. No. The entities descending from the light beams in those manuscripts bear a much more surreal form. Their wings are abstract, full of sharp geometric blocks, looking exactly like the symbols carved on the massive obelisks along the Nile. Their names? Forget Michael. Forget Gabriel. Those entities bear names that echo the phonetics of the desert. Mahat and Hora. For the early church, this was a dead zone. If angels and those damn Egyptian gods share the same characteristics, what is the only logical conclusion? That they have the same origin. That divine messengers are not anyone's exclusive privilege. That we are facing a much more ancient communication network, built not with Bibles, but with vibrations, sacred geometry, and sound. Today, do you think academia has ignored this? Behind closed doors, linguistic anthropologists are working silently. Funding flows from anonymous foundations through religious universities. They are secretly cross-referencing every phrase from ruined Egyptian temples with lost gospels. And do you know the most terrifying part? Sometimes the words match perfectly. Sometimes when scholars try to read those syllables aloud, the energy in the room suddenly transforms. Because what would happen if angels never spoke Hebrew or Latin? What would happen if heaven actually communicated in a much more ancient language? A language that once roared in the great temples and has now been swallowed by the desert sands. A language that once echoed in stone halls when the most powerful priests summoned light from the stars. That language never disappeared. It only changed form, waiting for someone to listen. Do you know what the best way to hide a tree is? It's to hide it in a forest. And the best way to hide a practitioner of pagan sorcery? Well, the Vatican chose the most subtle way, by canonizing him. Welcome back with me, Zorro. If you thought angels using Egyptian spells in the previous part was a slap to history, then prepare yourself. We are about to flip open the biography of a man the church would rather burn to ashes than let you read the original. His name is rarely mentioned in Sunday sermons. He is but a tiny, faded footnote in ancient hagiographies, a ghost wandering the quiet corners of 12th century Spain and North Africa. People call him Saint Cyranus, but for people like you and me, those who like to take a magnifying glass to the razor-thin line between God's miracles and forbidden rituals, Cyranus shines as bright as a torch. According to a leaked memo currently sitting on the desks of current Vatican officials, the existence of Cyranus is a time bomb. Why? Because his miracles are unlike those of any other saint. He didn't raise his hands to the sky to turn 5 loaves and 2 fish into food for thousands. He didn't touch a blind man's eyes to let light flood in. No, the power of Cyranus had a completely different flavor. The smell of strange incense, the scent of desert herbs, and the smell of ritual. Close your eyes and imagine this scene. A parched afternoon in North Africa. A sick person lies gasping, skin pale from fever. Instead of kneeling and praying in standard Latin, what does our saint do? He bends over, using his thin fingers to draw strange geometric symbols on the dusty ground. He chants deep, guttural sounds, a language rising from the chest that no contemporary monk dared to translate. A trembling letter from a panicked bishop of that time recorded Cyranus' healing. The saint whispered mysterious words into a bowl of water, then held it to the lips of the dying man. The miracle happened. The fever evaporated as if it never existed. Open wounds stitched themselves shut. The flesh became seamless. However, the language he poured into that bowl of water was not Latin. It was absolutely not Greek. According to a scholar who risked their life secretly studying Cyranus' original texts, what this saint used was almost entirely ancient Egyptian. Scarier still, it matches the characters carved on the stone walls of the temple of Khemism, a temple dedicated to the crocodile god Sobek and the falcon god Horus. The irony is starting to get thick, you see. But wait, the truth doesn't stop there. Deep in the archives, an old manuscript is preserved. Right on the margin of a tattered page, some anonymous cleric left a tiny drawing. It wasn't a cross. It was an Ankh symbol, the Egyptian key of life. Beneath that drawing is a note in Latin. The handwriting hurried as if the writer were trembling. He used this to speak with the dead. Do you know what the church did when they discovered those words? Other scribes frantically used razors to scrape the parchment, using black ink to overwrite and erase its existence. They wanted to bury this accusation. But unfortunately for them, the 21st century has something called spectral analysis. When the modern light beam scans the page, the blurred smudges begin to appear clearly. The original ink dates to the same period as the main text, meaning, even back then, someone in the top echelons of the church knew exactly what kind of devious game Serenus was playing, and they did their best to cover it up. The Vatican was pushed to a ruthless crossroads. Either they had to publicly bow their heads and admit they had placed a sainthood crown on a warlock who practiced sorcery, or they had to invent a new story. Of course, with centuries of experience in needing the truth, they chose the second option. They rewrote Serenus's entire biography, a whitewashing PR campaign of unprecedented proportions. Those Egyptian chants that shook the air around him, they were relabeled as prayers in a state of holy ecstasy. Those crooked magical circles on the ground instantly turned into symbols of intense concentration. And the ritual of whispering into a bowl of water, well, that was just a normal blessing of sanctification. However, how can paper wrap fire? In dark corners, witnesses who saw Serenus with their own eyes still left whispers. They said the saint didn't carry a Bible, but hanging from his hip was a bag of pungent herbs brought back from the port of Alexandria, that when night fell, he spoke of summoning fire from the stars through the names of gods the church called demons. The cloak he wore sowed terror. It wasn't embroidered with a cross, but with bright stars and a massive coiled serpent. Some whispered that he had studied in Egypt long before donning the church's robes. Bolder voices even claimed Serenus was originally a high priest of Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom and magic, before he got bored and decided to wear Christian clothes. Regardless of the truth, his eerie blend brought practical results. People were brought back from the dead. Raging storms were quenched with a mere wave of a hand. And for a long time, Rome turned a blind eye. Because the harsh truth is, results carry more weight than rules. Where there are miracles, there are followers. But every game must end. Today, as the digital age opens the doors of underground libraries, as forbidden texts are secretly translated by hackers and independent scholars and spread online, the ghost of Saint Serenus is rising again. The Vatican is scrambling to reevaluate his sainthood in extreme panic. What are they afraid of? They fear that if you, I, and millions of others start connecting the dots, we will realize a naked truth. His miracles were not at all grace from heaven. They were spells, original Egyptian spells. And the biggest question, the question that keeps popes awake at night, is, if a saint used Egyptian magic to make things happen, then in the past thousands of years, how many other saints were also sorcerers in disguise? Perhaps, my friends, the line between what is called a holy miracle and dark magic has never been so clear. Or worse, perhaps from the very beginning, that line was never meant to exist. Imagine you are taking an elevator deep down into the restricted archives of the Vatican Ethnological Museum. There, in a dark corner with no sign, no public documentation, is a display case sealed with thick tempered glass. Inside is a jet-black stone tablet, only the size of a dinner plate, its surface densely carved with bizarre symbols identical to Egyptian hieroglyphs. Archivists don't even dare to give it a name. Why? Because when the lights in the museum go out, when darkness swallows everything, the characters on that stone slab glow. Don't think of phosphorus, luminous paint, or any mundane chemical. This light is soft, bearing an eerie golden metallic hue, flickering like a candle imprisoned beneath a cold stone shell. And here is the bone-chilling part. According to a 1973 top-secret security report, which should have been burned but somehow leaked out, That light pulses to the rhythm of voices around it, especially when someone is praying. The Vatican couldn't ignore it anymore. They dragged a leading scholar in, forced him to swear silence with the most dire oaths, and asked him to decode it. The scholar's conclusion? Those glowing characters weren't just similar. They were exact copies, perfect down to every cut and nick, of a papyrus from the Book of the Dead found in Thebes. Stop for a moment to understand the nature of the Book of the Dead. Don't let its name fool you. It's not a dreamy fantasy novel about the underworld. It is a user manual, a survival guide full of spells and technical instructions so that a soul can manipulate the afterlife. The glowing tablet beneath the Vatican is not an art piece. The translated lines carry a clear command. Speak, and the gates shall open, and call the names of the stars and become the light. Those aren't poetic metaphors, they are activation tools. But activate what? The church truly panicked. In the 1980s, they secretly brought scientists from the Pontifical Academy down to take measurements. The lead physicist, a cold mind famous for exposing fake miracles, resigned after exactly 1 month. In a personal notebook revealed by a colleague, he had tremblingly written, "Non-thermal luminescence without a power source." And most terrifyingly, coherent characters capable of reacting to thought patterns. This last line was brutally struck out with red ink by someone in the Vatican. The decoding scholar was transferred without fanfare and permanently barred from publishing another line. Today, the stone slab has been moved 3 times in just 10 years. But a former housekeeper who used to clean downstairs is still haunted enough to quit. He swears that, in the middle of the night, the electric lights will flicker wildly, and a golden light will leak from the cracks in the ceiling. The stone slab is not an inanimate relic. It is still active. It is still listening. The question is, when it reacts to the prayers of the monks, exactly which entity is answering from the other end of the line? But that stone slab isn't even the worst thing. Go back in time to 1972. They called it a routine maintenance check. A clumsy lie. That vault had been locked tight for 400 years. Its lock was older than the history of most modern nations. The seal bore the signet of a pope whose name has been scraped from every chronicle. No one knew what was inside, only one blood rule: never open it. But human curiosity is always a deadly poison. At exactly 11:42 a.m., a group of 6, 3 Swiss guards, 2 scholars, and a priest, was ordered to enter. The vault door was lined with heavy lead, carved with symbols that did not belong to the Christian world. They broke the wax seal, inserted the ancient key into the lock, and turned. The door groaned open. And then, the Vatican's security camera system suddenly lost its signal. The videotape was interrupted for exactly 12 minutes. When the screen lit up again, the stone corridor was empty. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, only a door wide open into the pitch-black void and a deathly silence. A moment later, from the darkness, a guard stumbled out. He didn't say a word. He just cried. Tears streamed down his vacant face. His uniform was torn and scorched, as if he had just stood at the center of a bomb blast. But the fire alarm didn't go off. There was no fire, no smoke. When Vatican doctors rushed in, they discovered something that made their skin crawl. All his vital signs were normal, except for his eyes. The pupils of that poor guard had deformed, shrinking into the shape of perfect 5-pointed stars. He was injected with high-dose sedatives and thrown into a top-secret isolation ward. 3 days later, he died. Not from wounds, but from thirst. He frantically refused to drink a single drop of water that wasn't blessed, as if something evil were lurking in every normal H2O molecule. The other 5 evaporated forever from the world, not a single trace. Inside the vault, there was only dust. But when a commander rechecked the static-filled tape, he saw something that kept him awake for the rest of his life. The shadows cast on the stone wall. They moved without following the laws of light. They slithered in a twisted way, as if something had stepped through the door and calmly walked out into the world. At 12:05 p.m. that day, the vault was lead-sealed forever. An emergency decree was personally hand-signed by the Pope that very afternoon, citing the reason, violation of preventing sacred silence. The area was locked down and had to be exorcised by high-ranking priests every 40 days. Until the very moment I am talking to you now, a new Coptic inscription has been carved deep over the stone door. Here ends the voice of the ancient gods. But the church knows, and insiders whisper, it's too late. Something got out. Not a person, not an object, but a presence. An ancient piece of consciousness that had been locked underground for centuries is craving the atmosphere of humanity. Whether you call it Egyptian sorcery or a curse, the boundary between realms has been torn. That vault is not just a secret, it is a warning in blood. Some doors are locked for a reason. It always begins according to the same script. Friends. A manuscript goes missing in the archives. A whispered chant is passed from ear to ear. A candle is lit in the wrong chapel at an hour when everyone should be asleep. No one applies to the Vatican for permission to contact the underworld. They just quietly disappear into the archives, sneak into locked rooms, frantically memorizing ancient phrases written in ink that has faded under the sun. And then, boom, something happens. Of course, the Holy See will smile and tell you that all is well. But if you have the skills to dig through secret incident reports, you will see the cracks. In 1983, an old monk in France was found unconscious right in the abbey catacombs. Around him were circles of pitch-black ash drawn with soot from a type of incense that has been extinct since the 5th century. On the cold stone floor, he had used his bloody fingers to write a single word. Not Latin. It was a character extracted directly from the Jesuits' forbidden Egyptian manuscript. When he woke up 3 days later, his memory was a blank slate, except for a mumble repeated like a scratched record. The One has spoken through the fire. Or like in 1997, a group calling themselves the Sons of the Dawn was caught red-handed prying open the Vatican cryptic library. You think they brought crowbars or hammers? No. In their bags were Egyptian scarabs, Coptic chants, and a hollowed-out human bone wrapped in linen soaked in myrrh. They didn't come to read books. They came to reenact. The leader, before being hauled away, laughed madly and claimed they were opening a path connecting this world to the deep temple, where Egyptian magic is not superstition, but a branch of quantum science to reach into other dimensions. Every such effort ended in silence, memory loss, madness, blood, and death. The Vatican waved its hand, bodies were moved, files were burned, chronicles were altered. But, my friends, the red-robed men in Rome forgot one thing. You can imprison a book, but how do you lock up the internet? Look at what is happening out there. It starts online with a few mysterious posts, then explodes into TikTok videos with glowing magical Ankh symbols. Kids whisper to each other about Thoth, the Kybalion, the emerald tablets as if it's the latest fashion trend. The clergy thought it was just cheap cosplay by edgy kids. But no, this generation, supposedly historically illiterate, is reviving a history more ancient and powerful than any doctrine the church forced us to swallow. They call it Khemism, a return to Kemet, the original name of Egypt. Teenagers are fed up with rigid dogmas. They glue their faces to pyramid texts, track lunar cycles, decode star maps on Discord. They talk about ascension, about internal alchemy, and assert that the gods don't sit on clouds judging us. The gods are right inside us. Thought shapes reality. The Vatican immediately smelled danger. One of their cultural observatories leaked a document calling this trend theological instability. They aren't afraid of magic. Do you know what they fear? They fear the questions. Why does the Bible reek of Egyptian myth? Why do early Christian texts hide rituals for which they once burned others alive for daring to practice? And then, the climax of the collapse of illusions took place, not in some dark corner, but right in the heart of the system. St. Peter's Basilica. An ordinary Sunday, cameras live streaming, thousands of tourists and parishioners crowded in, the air filled with the scent of holy incense. The priest stepped up to the altar, but the sound that slithered out of his throat was not Latin. They were guttural, ancient syllables, rubbing against each other like massive stone slabs shifting. It didn't sound like a slip of the tongue. The air in the basilica suddenly thickened. People stopped breathing, and then pop. All the microphones disconnected at once. No explosion or short circuit, just the deathly silence of machinery. However, the priest's voice continued to echo throughout the stone vaults without any electronic amplification. It was a rhythmic chant, slow, crawling under the feet of thousands of people. Candles along the aisle suddenly flickered before a non-existent wind. Space seemed to bend. A few people fainted on the spot. The most terrifying thing was the footage frozen in the control room. The final frame captured the priest with his mouth wide open, and his eyes, the irises had vanished, leaving only a soulless blank white. After exactly 1 minute, he blinked, looked at the crowd as if nothing had happened, and continued the Mass in perfect Latin. Naturally, as soon as the service ended, security whisked him out a side door. He evaporated forever. The Vatican issued a statement that it was a minor technical glitch, personally erasing all backup recordings and strictly forbidding staff from opening their mouths. But whispers still leaked through the cracks. Those in the know swear that chant was Coptic, a spell used to resurrect and summon a divine presence from the dead, copied from a papyrus scroll kept beneath the Vatican. Something, a force too ancient to be named, had borrowed his body to speak. You see, Egyptian magic was never a circus trick of turning sand into gold. It is memory. It is the power to shape the world with your own intent. Each spell is a sharp reminder. The universe is listening to you, and you have the power of a miniature god. And that, my friends, is the fatal vulnerability of those in power. They tremble before a power that does not require permission. If you can protect your own soul with your own voice, then what do you need an intermediary system for? Why do you need men in robes standing on high pulpits to dispense salvation in drops? Freedom, in ancient Egyptian ideology, means you are unbound. Your soul is free to tear through the veil of death. Your mind can grasp the light on its own without anyone leading you by the hand. That independence is scarier than any pointed horn demon. That is why they had to bury the manuscripts, erase the names, and brainwash you with fear. You cannot herd a flock of sheep if they suddenly remember they are a pride of lions. But memory is a very strange thing. No matter how many layers of lead you pour, how many vault doors you lock, it always finds a way to leak out. And when it returns, even the strongest walls of the Vatican cannot stop it. Not forever.